Hello folks, welcome to Radio Espial episode 72. Thank you for tuning in and for your support and continued engagement with the channel. Now in this episode we provide 3 case updates which we've seen significant changes on in recent weeks, and a brief update on a 4th case which has seen further convictions in relation to that. Now the 4 we're going to look at are the disappearance and murder of Tina Satchwell from Youghal, and was reported from her hometown originally, and that was in 2017. The disappearance and murder of Fiona Pender in Tullamore, County Offaly in 1996. The disappearance and murder of Annie McCarrick in Dublin in 1993. And the murder of Ashling Murphy in Tullamore again, 2022. Now, we'll give summaries of each case's background, as well as highlighting some key facts often overlooked in the past where necessary. Now, for detailed information on the cases, their timelines, and any subsequent updates, the links for those are below the video. So please explore the full case examinations in those episodes, and some of them have playlists as well, which if you want to watch the whole lot through. Now, Mick will join us in a minute there. So just before we welcome Mick in there, this is important now, folks, please. As always, it goes without saying that disrespect for victims or families will not be tolerated. But for this update in particular, please be mindful considering how active both the Pender and McCarrick cases are at the moment, and the fact that no charges have yet been made in either case. Please do not post inflammatory material, privileged information, or disrespectful comments underneath the video. Furthermore, where we do not mention names or certain material in relation to these cases, it is for good reason to avoid jeopardizing a potential future prosecution. Now, if you can read between the lines, that's great, but remember, so can your fellow listeners. So don't compromise a case or earn a community strike for the channel by mentioning such information, naming names, or making inflammatory statements, please. Loose lips sink ships, as they say. So we welcome Mick there now as well. Hello, Mick.
Thanks, Brian.
How are you doing?
And thanks again for putting this episode together. Updates and important updates. 2 cases with similarities. 2 cases that are slightly different. Look, I think let's just I'm gonna hold my thoughts and let's just progress and get into the cases.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Mick. So first case we're going to look at is the disappearance and murder of Tina Satchwell. Now, I picked that picture deliberately there because she liked her style, and this was part of what she did as well. She was heavily involved in doing car boot sales and buying and selling clothes, which she turned around herself there as well. So I just deliberately picked that picture over there. Now, Tina Satchwell was born Tina Dinkovan, was originally came from Fermoy in northeast Cork, and she was last seen alive in public on Sunday the 19th of March 2017 at a car boot sale with her husband Richard in the town of Carrigtwohill, County Cork. Now, she was originally from Fermoy. She lived in Youghal, and I've got a map there that we'll show in a minute there, and you can see Fermoy is in the top left, Youghal is in the bottom right, Carrigtwohill is in the bottom left, and Dungarvan, which we'll come to in a minute, County Waterford, is in the top right. So they're just the geographical areas that are pertinent to the case there, and you can freeze on the map there when we show that in a minute. So anyway, they lived in Youghal, and on the 24th of March, Richard Satchwell walked into Tina's original hometown of Fermoy's Garda station and reported that his wife had gone missing from their home in Youghal. He claimed that the last time he spoke to her was 4 days previously on the morning of Monday, the 20th of March, 2017, and that at 10:30 a.m. he drove to Aldi, just 30 kilometres away in Dungarvan, County Waterford, to buy fish at Tina's request. When he returned to their house at around 12 noon, she was not there, and he had not heard from her since then. Now, Tina was aged 44 at the time of her disappearance. Her birthday was later in the year. She was born in 1972, she was 44 at the time of her disappearance. Now, we've got a map there, as I said, which shows the towns that are pertinent there in the story there. Now, in the subsequent years, Richard Satchwell appeared on multiple TV and radio shows to discuss Tina's disappearance and appeal for help, including Crime Call, Primetime, The Ray D'Arcy Show, and on a radio interview with Neil Prendeville on Cork's Red FM. Neil Prendeville is a well-known DJ in Cork there. Now, Just to be clear, Youghal is County Cork on the border with Waterford, so a little bit of Youghal is in Waterford, but it's 90% of it is County Cork. It's a County Cork town, really. Fermoy is County Cork, Carrigtwohill is closer to the city, County Cork, and Dungarvan there is County Waterford. Just to be clear there. Now, there's a photo of Richard Satchwell, Tina Satchwell's husband. He was originally from England, but settled in Ireland after he married Tina. Now, Tina Satchwell's remains were ultimately discovered 6 years after she went missing, buried face down under the stairs at their Youghal family home in October 2023, upon which the case was upgraded to a murder investigation. Richard Satchwell was then arrested, remanded in custody, and charged with his wife's murder. Now, while the fact that Tina Satchwell's body was found in the couple's house where Richard Satchwell continued to live might imply that this was an open and shut case for the Gardaí and the DPP, it was not quite so straightforward. The case proved difficult, suffering several setbacks and delays along the way. Now, the case was very nearly lost in the preparatory phase ahead of Richard Satchwell's trial due to delays with the Gardaí providing the completed book of evidence to the court and the defendant, and the judge was understandably not happy with this, and he had, as they say, civil words with the Garda's senior case detective to jolt them into completing the proper preparation of the book of evidence under threat of the entire case being thrown out if this did not happen by the 26th of March 2024. Thankfully, the Gardaí duly got it done, and the book of evidence was produced in its entirety on time, and the trial was scheduled for April 2025. So, any initial thoughts there, Mick, before we get into the case update?
I think people, even now, despite that we have resolution, we won't go into it for people maybe who haven't followed this case and are waiting what happened. I still don't think people quite realised how close this case got to total and utter collapse. Really, I really don't think people realised the stern, and this didn't happen once. I think it was 3 times, didn't he? Warn the state prosecution. I think it was it Kelleher was the representing Garda in the case. Yeah. Once, twice, 3 strikes, you're out. Yeah. This is null and void. And he said, go ahead.
The judge's final word that they published was he basically said to them something along the lines that you'd be doing well to actually get it done this time. That's the way he said, something along those lines. So I think he was of the mind. I believe this when I see it.
I think along the lines of you've delayed me twice. I'm giving you one last date to come back here with the book of evidence. If you don't come with it, and I'm not totally convinced you're going to be able to, this case is totally and utterly dismissed. And good luck with trying to prosecute it again. And
because they came close in January. It nearly got turfed out in January. In fact, I think it would have been within his rights to turf it out in January, but he gave them.
He gave them. I think it was March, wasn't it? Yeah, he gave them to them.
March,
and it's like it does. I don't want to knock them. Ultimately, the Gardaí did drive the conviction home, but it was worrying, dangerously worrying how close this trial came to, and I think, well, we would have been talking about, had that trial collapsed, we would have been talking about this for years. I
know, because it's like like the thing, obviously I'm not privy to everything there, but the fact that it's such, like, this is bread and butter stuff, pulling it together, your fight for the DPP, all the rest of it.
You've either got it or you haven't got it. You've either got
exactly
all the results back from DNA and whatever you're waiting for, or you haven't. What's your delay? And that was what the judge asked him. What on earth is delaying this? And there was all talks of, we had to send results off to here and there and over to Wales, and then it does reflect back, and my larger question will be, this is not something we want to see again in a trial.
No way.
And a book of evidence being put together like this again, because there could potentially be a collapse of trial. And you do, and we'll talk more about this in a couple of issues that have been raised in recent trials and some of what we're going to talk about later, but about resources that Gardaí have and their ability to actually be it. They're a professional force. We know they're trying their best, but
tough job,
what they are trying to do and put together for very serious cases, and due to lack of resources, this is the kind of crap that can potentially happen, and that will be a terrible travesty of justice. In fairness, Richard Satchwell deserved his trial and his day and his case, but equally for Tina and Tina's family, and nobody wants to see a situation where a judge goes, I'm done with this, you've had your chance, prosecution, get the hell out of here, case dismissed, end of, game over, good luck, see you.
And especially with a case like this, because it was on a platter. She was found in the house. The guy, he was the only guy there, so like it was literally, he might as well have been standing over with the knife or the rope or the gun. You know, it was, and you know, I don't mean any disrespect, but I know there's all the paperwork and all that stuff, but like, you know, that was very much an open and shut.
This wasn't the most difficult case to get over the line in the end. In the once the body was found, that's it, really is it. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No, we'll press on there. So, okay, so to the case update, folks. Again, there's a full timeline for this case. The link will be under the video there. Please dig into that. There's a couple of update videos as well from the time when Tina's remains were found and so on. So you can dig into them in the underneath there. Now, so to the case update. Now, Richard Satchwell went on trial for his wife Tina Satchwell's murder in April 2025, as we said. He pleaded not guilty. Now, Satchwell's murder trial itself was complicated, and with his story changing through various Garda interviews conducted with him. Only on final arrest, after the discovery of her body at their home, did he include a revised account of how she attacked him with a chisel. And ultimately, Tina Satchwell's cause of death could not be determined, unfortunately, given the state of her remains over 6 years until discovery. But the evidence presented was sufficient to progress with the trial. So this all culminated in a tense wait for the jury to deliberate for 9 hours over 4 days to decide on one of the three possible outcomes. And this was a bit of a sweat, as I'm sure Mick would acknowledge as well. So either they had to decide that Richard Satchwell was guilty of murder, he was guilty of manslaughter, or not guilty by means of self-defense. And it was tough to get to that final one, as you can see from the deliberations. Now, the jury unanimously found Richard Satchwell guilty of murdering his wife Tina, and he was convicted in May 2025. The family issued a statement, and we'll take an insert of that now.
Richard Satchwell has been found guilty of murdering his wife Tina at their home in Youghal, County Cork in 2017. After a trial lasting just over 4 weeks, the jury at the Central Criminal Court took almost 9.5 hours to find Mr Satchwell guilty of murder.
Tina Satchwell's family burst into tears as the jury's verdict was announced. Richard Satchwell showed no emotion. The portrait he had painted of his wife as a violent, volatile woman who attacked him regularly was not recognised by those who knew Tina and loved her.
During this trial, Tina was portrayed in a way that is not true to who she was. Tina was our precious sister, cousin, auntie and daughter. Her presence in our life meant so much to us all. We as a family can never put into words the impact of her loss that has had on all of us. Tina was a kind, loving, gentle soul who loved her animals like they loved her, and that's the way we want her remembered. Today, as a family, we finally have justice for Tina. In this time, our family would like to ask for privacy to begin our healing.
Sarah Howard travelled to give evidence in the case despite having given birth 2 weeks previously. She and Ms Satchwell's sister Lorraine thanked those who found Tina and got justice for their family. Satchwell had reported his wife missing on March the 24th, 2017, saying she had left home 4 days previously, taking their savings with her. For more than 6.5 years, he persisted with this lie in a manner the prosecution described as shamelessly brazen. It was only when Gardaí dug up his sitting room and found Tina's partially decomposed remains in a grave under the stairs that he changed his story. He claimed she attacked him with a chisel, that he fell backwards and she died as he tried to hold her off using the belt of her dressing gown. He told Gardaí it was all a blur. It was an account described as farcical and self-serving by the prosecution, who said he murdered his wife because she threatened to leave him. The jury deliberated for 9 hours and 28 minutes. They didn't believe Satchwell was acting in self-defence. They believed he intended to kill or cause serious injury to his wife.
Thank you.
He'll be sentenced next week to life in prison, and victim impact evidence will also be heard.
The conviction of Richard Satchwell for the murder of his wife Tina comes more than 8 years after he first reported her missing. Our Southern editor Pascal Sheehy looks back on the many twists and turns that have marked that agonising time for her family.
On March 24, 2017, Richard Satchwell told Gardaí his wife Tina had disappeared from their Grattan Street home in Youghal 4 days earlier. The delay in filing the missing persons report was enough to give rise to suspicion. In the months that followed, Gardaí conducted several searches, including at Richard and Tina Satchwell's home and along the waterfront in Youghal.
To me, she's the most amazing person that I've ever come across.
During this time, Richard Satchwell remained uber available to the media.
I'm just getting more and more worried. I find it more difficult to sleep. I'm losing weight with worry, struggling to eat. And I just know somebody out there has to know something. Tina, come home. There's nobody mad at you. My arms are open. Because it's killing me, Tina, love. Please.
Real animal lover and a real fashion lover was how I described Tina.
It was a difficult time for Tina's own family.
It seems to be a mystery how she can walk out the door 1 minute and just be gone the next.
Are you looking for a body here?
What we are looking here today is evidence in relation to the investigation into the disappearance of Tina Satchwell.
But despite almost 2 weeks of searching, nothing of evidential value was found. The real breakthrough didn't come until October 2023. Richard Satchwell was arrested on suspicion of Tina's murder. Their house in Youghal was sealed off and searched.
Yesterday evening, the Garda Technical Bureau team discovered what are believed to be human remains.
This was the end for Richard Satchwell's lies and deceit, and the beginning of the process of grief for her family.
Okay, folks, so that was the family's statement there. Now, in June 2025, shortly after Richard Satchwell was formally sentenced to life in prison, backdated to 12th of October 2023, when he was taken into custody. And the family again issued a statement, so we'll just take another short insert there for that.
Richard Satchwell has been sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his wife Tina at their home in Cork in March 2017. The court heard victim impact statements from family members who described Satchwell as a monster and a master manipulator.
Lorraine Howard told the court Richard Satchwell isolated and alienated his wife from her many friends before he murdered her. Using her sister's maiden name, Tina Dingavan, she said Satchwell had pushed the narrative that she was violent and coercive, and the family were thankful the jury had seen through his lies. Lorraine Howard said Satchwell had treated the remains of the couple's dog with more respect than his wife's body. She said he had put the family through the ultimate hell, and she said he had wanted Tina where he could still have the ultimate control, in his home under the stairs. Ms Dingavan's niece, Sarah Howard, said having her aunt's name tarnished in court was very difficult, and she was horrified he had offered her the freezer in which he had stored her aunt's body. She asked the judge to consider the cruelty, deception and false hope Satchwell had created. Detective Garda David Kelleher told the court Satchwell had 14 previous convictions, including larceny from a shop, theft and cheque forgery. Mr Justice Paul McDermott imposed the mandatory sentence of life in prison. The conclusion of the case was welcomed by the Garda team who took over the investigation in 2021.
We are thankful that this investigation has provided answers and a sense of justice for Tina's family and the wider community. While no resolution can erase the pain of loss, we sincerely hope that the conclusion of this case brings some measure of comfort to Tina's family. We extend our deepest gratitude to the witnesses in this case and all of those who assisted us throughout the investigation. Finally, we, the investigation team, are happy that justice has been served for Tina.
Satchwell's defence counsel, Brendan Grehan, told the judge he'd been instructed to say three things: that Satchwell intended to appeal, that he insisted he never intended to kill Tina, and that despite anything said in the trial, she was a lovely person. The family said he had manipulated them for years and they would never forgive Satchwell for what he had done. Orla O'Donnell, RTE News.
Okay, very, very tragic, and I know the family got as much justice as possible there, but very, very tragic, and sincere condolences to the family there. Now, just to move to our discussion and conclusion there now, the successful conviction of Richard Satchwell for Tina Satchwell's murder is a welcome occurrence for long-term missing persons cases, but it's relatively rare in that number one, that they're found, and number two, the perpetrators tried, convicted and jailed when it's a murder case. So let's be frank, folks. Tina Satchwell's husband, Richard Satchwell, is and was always the only suspect in her tragic disappearance and murder. Richard Satchwell's behaviour was bizarre in many ways. You can dig into this yourselves, but staging, finding two supposedly missing suitcases, suggesting she'd gone to England when none of the contacts in England had seen her, showing reverence to her cat's remains, a reverence that he hadn't shown towards her, courting the media in general. And the one thing that I always found disturbing was his remarks about his missing wife posing or being spoiled rotten. They were neither affectionate nor appropriate. They were quite revealing about his attitude, and I thought disturbing, in fact. Tina liked her style, that's why I picked that picture at the start, like most women, but she did not spend vast sums of housekeeping money and clothes. The reality was that she was astute, industrious, business-minded, and turned used clothes into money. So that made her the brains of the operation when it came to their car boot sales operations that they used to do. Now, Satchwell's demeanour was peculiar as well. Even though he appeared to break down in tears in some interviews, the underlying visceral hurt apparent even in the most stoic or reserved loved ones of victims seemed to be missing, really. And instead, he liked to talk a lot. He enjoyed the limelight, possibly the game itself, arguably. And whether he was a catch-me-if-you-can merchant who got off on getting away with this heinous crime and covering it up is debatable. And there are several people like that over the years. But ultimately, such games of his became irrelevant with his conviction. Rest in peace, Tina Satchwell. So, Mick, any other comments on the case there?
We've both been following this case for several years. We've seen all the utterances of the husband, Richard Satchwell, in public. Sometimes controlled, sometimes very bizarre. A man incredibly talkative and open to the media. Now, whether you consider that a good thing or a bad thing, that's what he chose to do. I'm often, when I look at this case, reminded of the case of Joe O'Reilly and his conviction for the murder of his wife. And I see an awful lot of the same narcissistic activity in this case and behaviour. Very same. A man who thought he could get away with it and couldn't be caught. In regards to the trial itself, I've heard a lot of weird things, even in my very, very young days in the courts as a young pup covering trials. But I thought, my God, I've never in a murder trial heard discussion about a pet parrot. When it died, when it didn't die, was it still alive there or after? Aspects of scams operating that Richard was sucked into to buy monkeys from a far off distant land and got sucked into to import all to appease apparently his wife Tina. There were bizarre instances of this case that you would just go, am I living on the same planet? Where were these people? What was going on in their lives? And we'll never quite know. I think the aspect that caught Richard out was the continual reinvention of the story. At every stage, the more and more he realised Gardaí knew more and more about what might have went on, even prior to Tina's discovery. He kept changing his story. He knew they knew more information. He would alter his story a little bit more. And the point where Kelleher, in that hotel, in a one-on-one interview, confronted him in a psychological examination, I think that's where they realised, we've got this guy. And that led to the forensic and invasive first search of the house. And within hours, they'd found Tina's body. Particularly when they focused on the understairs, and he started asking in the hotel, Keller asking Satchwell, what did you keep under the stairs? And he said, oh, bits and pieces. In that moment, Kelleher knew, she's under there. Yeah. That's it, get the warrant, we're going in, that's where she is. And within hours, Fern, the dog that you've heard about in a number of cases, was brought down from the PSNI, and you'll hear probably Fern, that dog, in a number of cases tonight, and also in future cases that's used. That's another story. I think it all comes down to the jury.
Sorry, Mick, just one thing on that.
Yeah.
He actually said at one point then as well that he'd given the guards had the keys to the house. Like, he was that complacent. He actually said, sure, I've given the guards the keys to the house. Like, you know, I mean,
it's like go in and find me guilty, will you, for God's sake?
Go on, knock yourselves out.
Knock yourselves out. You won't catch me out. I've got it all sorted.
Yeah, I think there was that catch me if you can thing about him already.
Yeah. And of course, anybody that saw that astonishing interview he did for over, I think it was over 90 minutes with Red FM, was just the most bizarre interview I have ever heard of an eventual convicted murderer trying to somehow excuse themselves out of, it's just bizarre. I think it all came down to, and if there was any stumbling block for the jury, I think it was all about Tina's robe, the chisel. Did his story of her coming at him with a chisel make sense? Then he kind of made it, well, Richard, where does chisel? Where did this chisel? Oh, I came down the stairs and she was chiseling away at the plasterboard. Then in another version, it was he was downstairs and she came downstairs, and everything kept changing all the time. I think he knew the game was up, and I think ultimately it was that forensic detail of the robe, the manner in which it had been tied around Tina's body, the manner in which the body was effectively, I think it was face down, wasn't it? Face down. The manner, and despite everything that Richard said conflicting, I held her for hours, and then you buried her face down. Yeah. You didn't even want to look at her face when you buried her. I think conflicted with everything he was telling them. They knew this whole stuff. Chisel? What chisel? No chisel ever found. No forensic ever found. Brian,
but he forgets. Like, guys like him don't.
They forget the version they previously told,
does that,
and how they reinvent it.
Yeah, exactly. You keep changing it. But there's that, and then the other bit is they forget that, somewhere along the way they've incriminated themselves. Like, so I guess one thing that these guys like guys like Satchwell forget in all their arrogance and narcissism and complacency, that, you know, somewhere along the way he's incriminated himself, and the more he talks and the more he, you know, courts the media and the guards and so on, the more likely he is to expose that, and that'll bubble up to the surface at some point, or he'll say the wrong thing to expose that. So, I mean, it's the one hope you'd have with some of those cases with people like that, you know, they fall on their own sword eventually, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So, we'll move on anyway, and
let's move on to the next
rest
case.
in peace, Tina Satchwell. And the next case we're going to look at now, it's been in the news again recently. This is the disappearance and murder of Fiona Pender. Now, there's a picture of Fiona Pender. She was a part-time model and a hairdresser. Now, just case background. Fiona Pender was 25, and she was last seen around 6 a.m. at her ground floor flat on Church Street, Tullamore, County Offaly, on the morning of Thursday, the 23rd of August, 1996. Now, she shared a flat with her boyfriend, John Thompson, who was a farmer. And following several months spent living in London from November 1995, the couple had returned back to County Offaly, Ireland in the spring, and he went back working on the farm again. And Fiona was born in 1971 to John and Josephine Pender and grew up in Connolly Park in the northeast of Tullamore. We'll show a map in a minute there now where you can see the various geographical parts. And they were a close-knit family. She had two brothers, Mark and John. Mark and Fiona, there was a year between them, and John was several years younger. He was about 12 years younger than Fiona. He came along later. Now, she left school at 15 years of age after she got her intermediate certificate, or intercert as we used to call it. And she was a hairdresser by trade, occasional part-time model. And Fiona was a bright, outgoing and positive young lady, beloved by her family, friends and the local community. She always wore a smile on her face, and she trained at Cassard's Salon and taken up some modelling work with her friend Emer Condren's agency. Now, at the time of her disappearance, Fiona was 7.5 months pregnant and had spent the previous day out shopping with her mother. Now, she was reportedly last seen by her boyfriend and the father of her unborn child at the couple's flat on Church Street before he left for work, going back to the farm. The farm was out in Killy, which was near the border with Laois. Now, Fiona vanished without trace, and for over 28 years, she has never been located. It'll be 29 years in August, this coming August. And following cold case reviews, her disappearance was believed to be a murder, and with the suspect as well. And sadly, Fiona's family was beset by tragedy. Her mother, who passed away in 2017, suffered 4 miscarriages. Her brother Mark, to whom she was very close to, and they had shared love of motorbikes, died in a motorbike accident in 1995, the year before she disappeared. And her father's grief at the loss of his son and daughter led him to commit suicide in 2000. Now, her younger brother John sculpted a beautiful monument, which is on the stretch of the canal now designated Fiona's Way. And he released a short film, My Sister Fee, in 2017 as well. It's not available anymore, but a beautiful film about Fiona and the family there as well. Now, Fiona's disappearance had a large impact on Tullamore beyond her family. She was popular with friends, neighbours, and other residents who knew her. And her church continues to pray for her weekly since her disappearance, and her friends organise an annual walk along the canal to raise awareness of her case each year. Now, just a short insert there. There's a local woman's statement about the impact that Fiona's disappearance had on the community there.
I remember seeing her in Dunstores just before she went missing with her mother, and I remember saying hello to Fiona and hello to Miss Pender, and then I heard she was missing. Yeah, it was a shock, to everybody. She was 7 months pregnant, and it was just sad. There was a sadness, over the town and everywhere, and still is. I hope they find her for her brother, and I know her poor mum, she died a few years ago, and she was like devastated, so it'd be lovely just to have closure for him and the family and for the town of Tullamore. I just think we need it.
No, we just got a quick map there on the Tullamore locality, so just so we know what we're talking about there now. You can see in the top right there, top right corner, that's Connolly Park is there, just up and leading off the top there. That's where Fiona grew up. You can see the Fiona Pender monument marked there. That's the monument that was designed by her brother John. That's the canal there, the blue part. And to get up to Connolly Park, you see the way the road swings around, because where the monument is, that just becomes a walkway there rather than a through road there. Church Street is down in the middle at the bottom there. You can see Church Street coming down diagonally, and it hits the bottom of the map in the middle. And then the main drag through Tullamore is just to the left of that there. That leads up to the canal. And the Bridge Shopping Centre, if you follow Church Street back up, Bridge Shopping Centre is the bottom left of the picture there. That's on the main drag in Tullamore as well. So all those areas are walking distance in the town centre. It's a nice Midlands town, Tullamore. It's a friendly place, a beautiful walk along the canal there, and that's been designated Fiona's Way there in memory of Fiona Pender. So just to the case suspect, John Thompson was the boyfriend. He was a farmer from Killay out in County Offaly, but on the border of County Laois. No, Gardaí never wavered from their belief that boyfriend John Thompson murdered Fiona Pender and disposed of her body in forest land or farmland with the assistance of family members. Now, that's a picture of John Thompson with his Jeep there from 2006. That was the Sunday World article in 2006. Now, Thompson was arrested and questioned in 1997 with 4 other relatives and released without charge. A file was reportedly being prepared for the DPP at this time, but the final progress, completion or delivery of this file to the DPP has not been reported on since. So I don't know if it was completed or not, or delivered. Now, after Fiona's disappearance, Thompson, following difficulties with the failure of inheritance cases from the family farm and transport company and an inheritance from his uncle, emigrated abroad with his new partner to the UK and later to Canada. And in fact, that article where the picture is taken from, his sister Tanya, who has since passed away, is interviewed, and it's clear that he wasn't working on the farm and she was. So there was it's what's not said rather than what is said is pertinent in that article there as well. So that's you can find that it's in 2006 there if you want to read further on that. Now we move on then to August 2014, and Gardaí and Earl become aware of an ongoing case in Saskatchewan, Canada, where the prime suspect in the abduction and murder of Fiona Pender was accused of sexually assaulting his wife and threatening to kill her. Now, he was acquitted of the sexual assault charges in a judge-only non-jury trial, so the judge took the decision on there. Again, you can look this up. There won't be any names mentioned, but it's out there in the media, and it's out there if you look for it in the Canadian press at the time. Now, when Gardaí travelled to Canada, the woman revealed that her husband, a truck driver and biker, had revealed to her that he was responsible for the disappearance of a missing woman in Ireland, and that if she ever spoke about it to anyone, she would end up like her, quote unquote. Now, she disclosed more information about the prime suspect and revealed that during the early years of their relationship around 2004, the other were married, he brought her up to the Slieve Bloom Mountains and chillingly indicated to her that he had buried the missing woman in the woodland area in Capard near Rossonellis, County Laois. Now, this area will be searched by specialist Gardaí teams, but no evidence of a body or grave was discovered. Now, just a quick word on extradition from Canada and the request for extradition potentially. Now, a person may be extradited from Canada only if the alleged criminal conduct in question and for which the extradition is requested is recognised as criminal by both countries. And there is law going back to the time when between Canada and the Union, when Ireland was part of the Union with the United Kingdom as well. So, but that's the law that stands there now with Ireland. Now, as communication between states are privileged, all information related to specific cases is confidential and cannot be released publicly until an arrest is made under an extradition warrant. That all makes sense. Now, it seems Gardaí and the Irish state have never forwarded an extradition request to Canada for Thompson. The reasons for this are not clear. However, Gardaí investigation sources have advised that should John Thompson ever set foot in Ireland again, they will arrest and charge him with murder. So that would suggest that the file for the DPP must have been completed and sent. Now, note, Larry Murphy is often erroneously reported as a suspect in Fiona Pender's murder. This is not the case, and she was not the victim of a Leinster-based serial killer either. There is and was only one suspect ever in her disappearance and murder, her then boyfriend John Thompson. Now, just as well, again, folks, the links for there's a full timeline on the Fiona Pender case. There's some further updates as well, and as part of Shattering the Vanishing Triangle illusion, we looked at the case from that perspective there as well. All those links will be below the video there as well, folks. So please check them out if you're not familiar with the case. You can get the information there. Now, before we go to the case update, Mick, any thoughts on this case?
The first thing that I suppose we need to address, which is the obvious thing, because people will say, why did you name the suspect in this case and why didn't you do it in that case? And there are legal reasons why we can and can't. And broadly, and I don't want to get too much into this, where a suspect has either been perceived to waive their anonymity with media or is a known and charged suspect is where we can name them. There are certain other cases, particularly prescient cases, where potential charges may be due, despite wide beliefs as to who the suspect might be. We are generally advised not to name that suspect, and that's the broad approach we take. And this isn't the first time we've named John Thompson as a suspect in this case. Brian, the other thing I would say is we didn't not me, you didn't you do some work on the tracking of that Jeep or something, and whether it was still about we were a bit, holy God,
it's still registered. I haven't checked it. A couple of years ago it was still registered. So
it just not necessarily because John Thompson in Canada by then, but again, I suppose what we were thinking of at the time when we came across this picture, we were thinking of, well, forensics, is there something relevant here? There was a suspicion that John Thompson didn't do this if guilty on his own, and would have had additional help from other people, so therefore the Jeep was relevant, and so we pursued that. But what can you get from a Jeep, whether it's still rolling around the land at this side at this time? Is it relevant? But we thought, again, just one of those loose lines, that it was worth pursuing.
Yeah, it was still registered a few years ago. I haven't checked it since now, but I remember looking it up a few years ago and it was still registered. But I mean, you'd expect it should have been. That should have been
hammered out and removed, and that's the end of that. And but we've no confirmation from Gardaí that it was ruled in or ruled out. But yet we know that there are witnesses that Gardaí have interviewed that a Jeep was seen and potentially involved in movements at the time. So okay.
So exactly, and I mean it's again go either way, whether it would eliminate them from their inquiries or incriminate them either way. It should have been examined.
Yeah, and as regards John Thompson, his movements, the last time we had contact and were advised on this case, and it was made very clear to us that should Mr. Thompson arrived back in Ireland, that there was a strong likelihood he would be immediately arrested. We are not aware of any occasion he has attempted to return here very recently.
No, I think the last one I've seen it was around, I think from another source, the source I saw was around 2013. I think that was
2013, and that's it's quite a time. We're talking 13 years ago.
That's not to say he wasn't here since, but
no. Other than he wasn't picked up, or there wasn't an alert to that fact, or when the Gardaí submitted that file and were told, we'll process that file when and if you make an arrest. And that's really where we seem to be. And we've already spoken to the extradition circumstances with Canada, and we don't know why specifically, if there exists a case with the DPP, why the DPP, and maybe for other reasons, they can't convince their, remember, extradition, you must convince. You can't just do it on your own and say, get him back here. You have to convince the other authority elsewhere, in Canada in this case, that you must arrest and detain this person and pass him over to our representatives if we send them over. And it looks that's where we quite are with this case, that has never progressed. There has never been full agreement on both sides. That might be because the Canadian counterparts don't agree that the Gardaí have a sufficient case, and no, we're not going to arrest him because
they might even have issued a request in the first place either.
Or they have never been directly asked. If we prepare an extradition, and this is the way it works, it isn't, here's our extradition warning, get him back here. It's like, if we were to put together an extradition warrant on these circumstances, would you be, because nobody wants a diplomatic
it's more of a submission than a kind of
it's a privately done in instruction. If we were to do this, would you do that? And then it's like, look at it, yeah, okay, fair enough, we'll do that. But we don't quite know where that process is at the moment.
Yeah,
Brian,
exactly.
Brian, do you want to go ahead?
Will do. Mick. So that's the story with that there. And yeah, I know, because there was a bit of a thing in the media. They didn't name him, but his sister passed away a few years ago, and Tanya Thompson, and there was I think some of the media were putting articles out there saying the Fiona suspect.
He's going to
may go back to her
keep
or whatever.
out,
but,
yeah.
You know, that was it. Like, you know. So anyway, okay. And both of his parents have passed since. His father died in 2000, and the mother died some years later as well. Now, the case update. So, folks, in May 2025, the Gardaí officially announced that they've upgraded the missing person case of Fiona Pender to a murder investigation. Now, it had been referred to as a murder on the Garda.ie website for some time before this, but this was the first official announcement and signalled the release of more resources to the case that this upgrade can bring as well. So that's the key thing, really, that they can deploy more resources on the case there to move it on. So just have a quick statement on the upgrade there, and we'll take an insert on that note.
Yep.
Well, I note that the Fiona Pender missing person inquiry has been upgraded to a murder inquiry. I've been informed by Garda Síochána that there's further developments taking place in respect of ongoing searches. I would just like to appeal to any member of the public who has information, that they would bring that information in respect of Fiona Pender's murder to the attention of An Garda Síochána. Her family have gone through a terrible time for the past 28 years or so, and I think it's incumbent upon anyone who has information to bring that information to the Gardaí.
We'll just show a quick map there of the broader Tullamore, Killea and Leach Offaly border area there. So you can see Tullamore there. It's one of the largest towns in Offaly there, and in the Midlands there as well. So it's you can see there the border with Leach is down the bottom there, and Killea is there as well, not too far off that border. No, it's not too far. It's less than 10 miles south. I suppose you call it south. Gardaí, investigating the disappearance and murder of Fiona Pender in August 1986, commenced a search operation on open ground at a location in County Offaly on Monday, the 26th of May, 2025. So this is very current at the moment, folks. So this we're just less than a month after that. Now, the area of land that was searched and subject to excavation, technical and forensic examinations there. Now, having completed a search of land near Killea in County Offaly, the search moved to the Slieve Bloom Mountains close to Clonaslee in County Laois on Wednesday, the following Wednesday. Now, Killea and Clonaslee are about a 10-minute drive apart across the county boundary, that county boundary between Laois and Offaly. Between Offaly and Laois. Now, Gardaí subsequently concluded the search operation in Slieve Bloom Mountains in County Laois and updated Fiona Pender's family. Now, the standard Gardaí phrase, the results of the searches are not being released for operational reasons. So that means either they found nothing or they found something, and they're going to keep it in the back pocket until such time as they can initiate an arrest or further inquiries to progress the case. Now, there's just a quick picture of the Clonaslee Road closure there and the surrounding area. Now, as I said, it remains to be seen what progress, if any, will follow the outcome of this latest search, because the Garda are staying tight-lipped on that. That's a standard statement there, updating the family and the not being released for operational reasons. And we sincerely hope it leads to answers for John Pender, her only surviving original immediate family member, and her wider family and friends. She has, there's a lot of people very caught up about Fiona Pender beyond the family as well there in Tullamore. Mick, any other thoughts or comments there on Fiona Pender?
Yeah, I always find these searches, and we know in our next case there's another major search going on. We've had more recent searches about cases, and that line, Garda have completed the search, and for operational reasons we are not commenting on that. And people, it's important, shouldn't read too much into that. It doesn't necessarily, well, let me qualify that. A lot of the time it does mean they haven't found anything significant, but it should not remove the possibility that they have found something of significance, but they don't know how significant it is. It might turn out to be, could be anything. And could be a piece of clothing, a shoe, it could be a piece of jewellery, it could be something more than that, and they're sending it off for analysis, and we won't know for days, weeks, sometimes months. And even after that, they will say, okay, what results did we get back on that? Is it relevant to the case and the search that we did? And someone will say, no, it's not. Okay, it might be something else related, we'll put that in the database. Or they might say, yeah, we think this is relevant to this case. And at that point, they'll make a decision. Do we go public with this? How much do we tell the public? And they may even say, no, we don't go public with this, but we have the information we have. And on that basis, we think we might even be able to make an arrest. And we'll use that information to put to the suspect who are clueless about what we found. And that's why these operational searches are quite covert and secretive about what they find. And I admit, an awful lot of the time they don't find out, and they go back again, and we've seen that. But sometimes something does come out, and even though you don't hear anything, there's a reason why. Brian?
Mr. I mean, that's the thing, like these cases, they're in particular, some of these, they're long, painstaking. They have to be worked the hard way. You really have to work them the hard way, and have huge patience. And there is the balancing act there of what to keep in the back pocket, what to put out there to see will it generate any further information or jog someone's memory or something. So there's all that to do. There's a strategy involved as well as the grunt work that has to be done, Okay, so look, we'll finish that. We've a nice picture of Fiona there at the end. So rest in peace, Fiona Pender. There's a nice photo of her at the end there, and who was murdered tragically in 1996, and hopefully her case gets solved there. Now, disappearance and murder of Annie McCarrick, our next case. Now, we'll have some just a case background there. So Annie Bridget McCarrick, born 21st of March 1967, was an American woman from Long Island, New York, went missing under suspicious circumstances in 1993 while she was residing in Ireland. Now, just a few things on some of the facts there. It's important to note here now. 21st of March 1967 is her correct birth date. Incorrect dates and the year 1966 have been stated even in official secondary documentation about the case. What do we mean by secondary documentation? I mean reports on international websites and official websites maybe police or maybe government and so on, and third-party websites, there are errors in some of them. I'm not going to specifically name any there, but why is this pertinent? Because, again, on the off chance, could be less than a fraction of a percent of a chance, but, supposing she was sitting next to somebody on the bus that we get to later, and she said she was going to be having her 26th birthday, or just turned 26, and then if the year was wrong, whatever, then that person would go, oh no, that lady was 27. No, so there's things like that. Obviously, if she was a musician or a sports person, mightn't matter as much, but in this case, it's important that we establish these facts correctly here, because she did have a birthday around the time, and that is pertinent to the case. Now, just in support of that, an Irish Times article featuring an interview with her mother, Nancy McCarrick, quoted her as saying that she and Annie's father, the late John McCarrick, married in 1965. The article then states, presumably from her statement, that Annie was born 2 years later, 21st of March 1967. It seems some sources incorrectly assumed that her birthday was the 27th of March, the day that she had scheduled the dinner party, which she did not host due to her disappearance. So it was the 21st was the correct date there. Now, another fact as well, the CCTV from the bank, and this was a real cock-up, so to speak. The CCTV from the bank that was presented and alleged to have been from the day of her disappearance was from an earlier date, and this was only acknowledged by the Gardaí in the past 2 years that they had the wrong date on that. And it was on the Garda website, even as recently as 2 years ago there. Now, thirdly, again, the primary suspect in Annie McCarrick's disappearance is not Larry Murphy, and she was not the victim of a Leinster-based serial killer, right? This is back to this vanishing triangle myth, okay? This is not she was not look, obviously, if there's evidence comes up and it goes through the mill and it shows that, I'll happily eat those words. But as it stands, that's not a line of inquiry. There's no evidence whatsoever to suggest either of those things. Now, Annie McCarrick was born in Long Island, New York, as we said, grew up and lived in Bayport until her move to Ireland in January 1987, age 19, to study at St. Patrick's College for teacher training in Drumcondra, Dublin. She later switched colleges and instead decided to study Irish literature at Maynooth University for 3 years. Maynooth is a town in County Kildare. It's about 12 miles or so, or maybe a bit more, outside of Dublin to the west in County Kildare. So it's kind of outside the greater Dublin area, but not that far. And for 2 years, she was in a relationship with a fellow called Dermot Ryan, a period which Annie was renting and sharing a small cottage with a female friend in Ballyboden in Dublin. In 1990, she returned to New York, and after a 4-month period, the relationship with Ryan petered out again. He returned to Ireland and later decided to move to Italy. And Annie instead remained in New York and spent 2 years in the US studying for a master's degree. Now, previously, she'd also been in a short relationship with Philip Brady, brother of her longtime friend Hilary Brady. She knew the Brady family in Clondalkin back since her first arrival in 1987 to 88 and stayed with them for a period of time. While back in America, after her return in 1990, she still yearned for a new fresh start in Ireland, which she pursued when she returned in January 1993. And almost all the family, friends, teachers, and people who knew Annie saw her as an outgoing and well-adjusted person, trusting of others, if a little too idealistic at times. But I think we need to be very clear here. She might have been a bit idealistic about Ireland and so on, but it's important to state that Annie McCarrick was not a doe-eyed young woman of presenting documentaries and books on this case. While idealistic, which everybody can be to some extent, particularly about Ireland, she retained her blue-collar upbringing and her street smarts as well. So that's important to note. It's also important to note Annie's independent streak. While she was close to enjoy the support of her parents, she travelled to Ireland alone and established herself in the country, first time around in 1987, and again in 1993, even though she was only there for a few months before she disappeared. She was assimilated well into Irish life, mixed with Irish people, lived with 2 Irish girls, had Irish boyfriends, and indeed she planned to settle in Ireland and was well on the way to being naturalised Irish, I think, anyway. Now, Annie McCarrick disappeared on Friday, 26th of March, 1993. Her mother, Nancy, had already planned to visit her late the following week, arriving Friday the 3rd of April, having just missed her daughter's birthday, remember, 21st of March. Annie, by then, was renting and living in an apartment in St. Catherine's Court, Sandymount, which she shared with 2 female friends, Jill Toomey and Ida Walsh, after responding to a newspaper advert for flatmates to share. Now, on Friday, 26th of March, the day of her disappearance, she had bought shopping from Quinsworth. Now, Quinsworth was a precursor to Tesco. They were there for years beforehand. So this is how long ago it is now. Quinsworth was back they had just to put in perspective, folks, anyone who's from our generation, the yellow pack goods and Morris Pratt used to be on the TV advertising them, So that was back that time. So Tesco took over afterwards and bought up all the Quinsworth stores, but they were a big supermarket at the time in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. So she left the shopping just inside the door before leaving her apartment, and this was found by her two flatmates when they returned 2 days later on Sunday. Now, the last confirmed sighting of Annie McCarrick was getting into a bus in Ranelagh, the 44C bus, and she has not been seen since. She was due to host a dinner party on Saturday, 27th of March with her friend Hilary Brady, who we mentioned earlier, and his then fiancée, Rita Fortune. When they arrived at the apartment, they failed to get an answer at the door, and when she did not turn up within a reasonable time, Hilary Brady contacted Annie's mother in New York to raise the alarm. Now, there were, in addition to, we're going to get to the case suspect and the update now in a minute. There was before we get to that, there was two other lines of inquiry, which are now believed to be derived from mistaken information and untrue. One, what was considered a major line of inquiry, saw the Gardaí work off witness accounts of her reaching Johnny Fox's pub in Glencullen, made the acquaintance of an IRA member who talked too much about his activities and murdered her with his colleagues helping with the disposal of her body. And another line of inquiry also, believed unlikely, saw her meeting with a man in a cafe called Poppy's in Enniskerry. And both of those are generally discounted now because she's not believed to have got to Enniskerry. And in line with the current investigation focus on prime suspects, believed Annie's disappearance occurred closer to home in Sandymount. Now, I've just done up two maps there. Again, there's no need to look into the weeds of these maps. Just the first one there quickly shows where Ranelagh is in relation to Sandymount. Sandymount's over there on the east coast. That's on the dark line there as well. And that's the Irish Sea there that you can see, Dublin Bay, the Irish Sea there, the blue part to the right. Ranelagh was further inland. The roads in Dublin generally, they come out radially. So you have, you can see there, you've got, maybe not clear in the map, Mount Street, Bagot Street, then there was the Donnybrook Road and Ranelagh, Rathmines, Harrods Cross and so on. And the bit up in the top left is the canal that went around in a kind of crescent shape there, the Grand Canal there. So anyway, Ranelagh is over in, I think it's Dublin 6, and so Sandymount then was over towards the coast. So then the wider map then of South Dublin city and county, you can see the M50 there, and then we have Johnny Fox's pub out the country and up the mountains there. So that's a long way away from Sandymount and Ranelagh there. And again, we'll talk about it in a minute, but if you were going to take a trip out to there or anywhere near there, you weren't just going to pop your groceries inside the front door and take two buses, the number 18 from Sandymount across to Ranelagh, and then onto the other 44 bus and go off out the country, So we'll get to that in a minute anyway. Case suspects, and the names are redacted now. Again, folks, please don't post anything in the comments because we're going to, the names are redacted here. And so we're going to just get into the case suspects first. There was reason in March 2023 that Gardaí in Ireland announced Annie's case had been upgraded to murder. What wasn't widely known at the time was that recent case reviews carried out from 2021 through to 2023 had uncovered significant failures in the original 1990s investigations. And that pressures to solve such a high-profile case, questionable witness and circumstantial evidence had diverted the case and its resources to the detriment of other lines of inquiry, which should have been followed up more closely at the time. And they're the two lines that I mentioned earlier. So there was other more pertinent lines that could have been followed. In short, there were stronger lines of investigation which should have led Gardaí to examine the possibility that Annie McCarrick's demise lay far closer to her Sandymount home and involved persons known to her at the time of her disappearance and events and interactions she had in the weeks and days prior to it. Information from her friends back in America about a man, now the primary suspect, who was harassing her and struck her shortly before her disappearance was allegedly faxed to the Gardaí, and this information was lost, unfortunately. The active investigation team had been scrutinising alibis provided by two brothers originally from the Clondalkin area, who both had on and off romantic relationships with Annie over a number of years when she was first in Ireland, and that the movements of both brothers on or about the time of Annie's disappearance are based on false alibis provided by friends, work colleagues, and relatives, knowingly or unknowingly covering for them. The Gardaí had been advised by the DPP that they were not prepared to consider any submitted file until those alibis had been cracked. So, I know there's a lot to digest there, folks. Before we get to the case update, Mick, any thoughts there? Anything you want to raise there or add to that?
All I'll say is what I've said before. In this case of Annie McCarrick, and that is Sky News have an awful fucking lot to answer for, and a certain Nyland journalist, because this charade has gone on long enough, and both of them are responsible for where we are now. I see it in the comments. People who don't question the crap that has been put out over the last 2 years in that documentary. This is where we are now. This is why people went, somebody's been arrested. She wasn't in Johnny Cullen. What the hell is going on? This is how we get here. This is how media play their role and get us where we are. Are the Gardaí not also responsible for where we previously were? Of course they are. But they learned their lessons in 2022 and 2023 when the case was completely taken apart and reviewed. And ultimately, mistakes were identified and new lines of inquiry came for that. This is where we are. We're not fucking back in 1993 with Mr. Murphy and the serial killers and wherever Miss Lylan and Sky News want to go. We're here now in daylight with a suspect arrested. We know more about what's going on and where this investigation is. And it really pisses me off about where this whole investigation has gone. Yes, the Gardaí should be held up and said, what were you doing? Why wasn't this line, and this line paid attention to? Why did you get so convinced that you went off in a beeline? I get it. I understand that there was an awful lot of witness circumstantial evidence on that day. What was it, 21st of March, the Friday, wasn't it?
Friday, 26th
Yeah,
of March.
the 26th of March. Annie had went to try and pick up her wages, said she'd be there the following day. The arrangement of the dinner party and then the phone call to a mate on the phone, the call box, that she was thinking maybe of going for a walk, and then suddenly the investigation went off on a beeline, off down to Johnny Fox's and Glenn Cullen in this ridiculous, crazy cahoots. And it was all based on people, and I'm sure, in fairness to them, with the best of intentions, but almost every single one of those, bar one, and that's the lady who knew Annie at the bus stop, I think, as she was heading out towards Milltown and got off. She was getting off, I think, at Milltown, wasn't she? Yeah. There's no evidence that Annie could have went any further than that. That's it. Physically, you know, we don't have any information. Never seen there after that.
Yeah. And it's madness.
It's madness that even back then, in 1993, the vast resources that were spent on chasing those witness statements, that none of them were ever corroborated. None of them were ever actually to say, oh, actually, yeah, this other person saw them, this person saw them, but there was no actual physical evidence that Annie was ever there. Nobody ever said, Actually, hang on. And remember, the entire half of the Gardaí force at the time descended on this area.
Yeah.
Yet no one could find the simplest. There's a photograph. There's CCTV footage. There's a phone call box that she might have made a phone call from. There's a friend who said, I also saw her there. None of that. Everybody, bar one witness in Ranelagh with the bus on the way to Milltown, is the only person who actually was credible and knew her. And yet everything shifted way up the mountains to Glencullen and Enniskerry, and it is just
really
baffling.
Back to basic stuff, like, you know.
This is something that you could have forgiven if it was the early 1900s, and it's almost like the detective investigation was being operated like it was in the 1900s. It was some far backward investigation, you know, with on the foot guard, and that's all they had. They had nothing else. They didn't have anything. Rather, they did have more than that. It's just.
But I think they lost sight. It's a bit like
they just got clouded. They just got lost in a fog.
Yeah, they forgot the basics. It's like when remember George Hook, the rugby commentator, was talking about when Ireland beat England one year, and he said the English came over and they forgot the first step in Mrs. Beaton's recipe for chicken soup. He said first catch your chicken, and that's where they went wrong there. They forgot the basics of. Hang on, she vanished in. She went from Santa Mount to Ranelagh.
We know absolutely where she was. We know she was in Ranelagh.
The basics is her trail goes cold from the minute she got in a bus. Whether she was sitting down or standing up or wherever she was, like in the bus, the woman didn't get to speak to her, so it must have been a full bus or something, because she clearly sounded like she would have said hello to her otherwise. So she, that was the last time she was seen.
Yeah, we know where she lives.
Miles away from Johnny Fox.
We know the possible bus route she might have taken. Okay, how far did she go? So let's interview everybody who knows her, who might have known where she was going.
The driver, the people, anybody who was on the bus. You know, that's where it should have started there with an appeal for, because there would have been people getting.
Well, in fairness, they did interview. They did interview the driver, and he said. Never saw her.
Sorry, did yeah. I suppose there's other people that would be commuting at that time regularly as well, so could have dug in for. But anyway, that's it. Sort of frustrating, and I think that Sky stuff is it really pees me off as well, mate, to be honest. And especially, it's worse for some of the other cases because they're very clear suspects in some of them, like the Fiona Sinnott case, the Fiona Pender case, the
Ciara case,
Ciara Breen case. So those three cases in particularly, those three girls were completely shortchanged by that bloody series because they go on with this, they're lumped in with that. And I think it was at the end. I watched both episodes, never again. And I think it was the end of the first episode or something. That's when they finally say, "Oh, there is other suspects in these cases," but you're going, "Well, why are they included in this?" So, like, do you know, it's just a total, and then getting these American talking heads in. And so on to talk about it, like, and it just doesn't come. It must be galling for those families who have to drag a lot of things along with them to be sitting there and watching this rubbish, like, do you know?
Okay, go on with your case update.
So, case update. Okay, now a man has been arrested on suspicion of the murder of Annie McCarrick. The man, who's a 62-year-old businessman, was detained in Dublin by detectives from Irishtown after being arrested at his home in County Meath on the 12th of June this year, 2025. Now, remember as well, this is a good many years ago, folks. If one turned 28 in 1993, they'd be 60 in 2025. So it's a good many years ago. And for this man in particular, this is, you know, more half a lifetime ago there, more than half a lifetime ago. So Gardaí advised that the man knew Annie McCarrick in the 1990s and described him as an associate who moved in her circle. The man was held at Irishtown Garda Station in Dublin under Section 4 of the Criminal Justice Act and questioned for a maximum time of 24 hours and subsequently released pending any further investigations. As he was not charged and admitted to no wrongdoing, he faces no restrictions on movement or any mandate to surrender his passport. Now we'll just take an insert there on the arrest.
A 62-year-old businessman has been arrested on suspicion of the murder of Annie McCarrick. The 26-year-old American woman went missing in 1993. Gardaí are also searching a house in Clondalkin in Dublin as part of the investigation.
Forensic specialists arrived and Gardaí moved heavy equipment into a house in Clondalkin this morning to take part in a search for evidence in the investigation into the murder of Annie McCarrick. The home has been sealed off. A temporary restricted airspace has been put in place to prohibit flyovers from drones or other aircraft while the search is going on. Gardaí say the current residents are not connected in any way with Annie McCarrick or her disappearance. Annie McCarrick went missing in Dublin over 32 years ago. The 26-year-old American woman had been due to have dinner with friends at her apartment in Sandymount that weekend, but they became concerned when they hadn't heard from her. She hadn't turned up for work and wasn't at home. Her last confirmed activity was just after 11 o'clock on Friday morning, the 26th of March 1993, when she bought groceries, which were discovered unpacked in her home 2 days later. Her friend reported Annie McCarrick missing that Sunday evening, the 28th of March 1993. Annie McCarrick's family later told the Gardaí that they believed she had been having trouble with the man who struck her before she went missing. This morning, detectives from the Serious Crime Unit in Irishtown arrested a man in his 60s on suspicion of the murder of Annie McCarrick. He is being detained at a Garda station under Section 4 of the Criminal Justice Act and can be questioned for up to 24 hours. The Clondalkin house and garden, which is over 100 feet long, are now being searched by the Dublin South Central Divisional Search Team, supported by the Garda National Technical Bureau, with support from other state and external expertise if required. The Gardaí say they have informed Annie McCarrick's family of today's developments and will continue to keep them updated in relation to the murder investigation. The 26-year-old visited Ireland as a child and loved it so much she came to live here. Her disappearance was upgraded to a murder investigation 2 years ago, and Gardaí again today renewed their appeal for anyone with information on the case to contact them.
This is the last confirmed sighting of Annie McCarrick. The 26-year-old was captured on CCTV shortly before 11 a.m. at the AIB Bank on Sandymount Road. She was living in St Catherine's Court, Sandymount, Dublin 4, with 2 other tenants. And she was working as a waitress at the Courtyard restaurant in Donnybrook and Café Java on Leeson Street. On Thursday, 25th of March, Miss McCarrick had called to the cafe to collect her wages, but they weren't ready, so she arranged to call in again the following day to collect them. She then visited friends and stayed for dinner. On Friday, 26th of March, Miss McCarrick spoke to both her flatmates before they left separately to travel home for the weekend. She made arrangements with friends, inviting them to her apartment for dinner the following day. And she was excitedly planning for a visit by her mother, who was due to arrive a few days later. The last confirmed activity by Annie McCarrick was grocery shopping. She bought items in Quinsworth on Sandymount Road, which were later found unpacked in her apartment. She wasn't at home when her friends arrived for dinner on the Saturday, and she was subsequently reported missing on Sunday, 28th of March at Irishtown Garda Station. There were reported sightings of Annie boarding a number 44 bus bound for Enniskerry and a number of further reported sightings in that area. The only child of Nancy and John McCarrick, her parents tried in vain to find her. Her father took part in searches in Enniskerry and the area around Johnny Fox's pub.
I'm emotionally drained, but we've got to keep looking and got to keep hoping. That's all we can do. That's what I think a father and mother have to do, We won't give up hope.
John McCarrick passed away in 2009. 2 years ago, after Annie's case was upgraded to murder, her mother Nancy said she just wanted to bring her daughter back home.
Whatever did befall her, it may have been accidental, so I would just love to be able to find her. Yeah.
32 years on from her disappearance, today's arrest is the first in the Annie McCarrick case.
Now, the primary suspect's brother, who was said to be in poor health in France, was questioned, and it is understood that the necessary information was gleaned to upgrade the case to murder. To arrest the primary suspect, as just happened, and initiate a search of their childhood home on Monastery Walk in Clondalkin. And you've seen that in the news recently.
Since this was upgraded to a murder inquiry 2 years ago, and as part of the process they have been re-interviewing witnesses, they've been reviewing statements, and they've been analysing and gathering new information and intelligence. And they say there doesn't seem to have been any major breakthrough at this stage, but it's as part of this process that a decision was made to make the first arrest in this investigation and arrest this man. Now, he's 62 years of age, he's a businessman, he lives in County Meath. The Gardaí arrested him this morning. His home in County Meath was searched as part of the investigation. He was taken into custody where he's still being detained. His period of detention was extended for a further six hours this afternoon by a Garda superintendent, and he's being interviewed by teams of detectives at a Garda station. Now, he can be held for a total of 24 hours, and a decision will be made later this evening to extend that period of detention for a further and final 12 hours. Annie McCarrick was 26 years of age when she disappeared. The suspect in custody was 30 years of age at the time. He did know Annie McCarrick. Gardaí have described him as one of her associates, part of a circle of associates, people who knew her. Now, the search at this house in Clondalkin has wound down for the evening. It's quite an invasive search. There's heavy machinery been brought in. A Kango hammer is being used, we think, on concrete and on a patio or inside the house. So obviously floors are being dug up. This is quite an invasive search.
So the same cadaver dog who discovered Tina Satchwell's remains, named Firm, on loan from the PSNI, was reportedly engaged in the search. Gardaí have used mini diggers, Kango hammers and other machinery to excavate a section of the property that has been built on in the period since Annie McCarrick disappeared. The search continues as of 20th of June as we record now. Now, just note as well, the current residents of the property at Monastery Walk, who have lived there for 15 years, are not under suspicion in this case. Radio Espial has spoken with sources close to Annie McCarrick and the primary suspect at the time, who confirm erratic behaviour on his part in relation to Annie and her subsequent disappearance. Those sources have already made statements to the Gardaí in recent years. For legal reasons, we have once again been strongly advised not to name the arrested suspect, but anyone who has followed the case timeline can read between the lines and pretty much figure out who the two related people we are referring to. We are at this point, like the Gardaí, where it is impossible to ignore the elephant in the room within this case. So, discussion and conclusion. Now, as we said earlier, other lines of inquiry were neglected, which should have been followed up more closely at the time of Annie's disappearance. And for me, what's very puzzling in this case is that if this suspect was on the Gardaí radar from early on, and he was acting as squirrely and as off the wall as reported with respect to Annie, then how was he not deemed a leading suspect and investigated thoroughly over the then unidentified suspect allegedly seen with her at Johnny Fox's in Glencullen that evening, when you actually had a real guy they were aware of, and then you had a description of a guy miles away in Johnny Fox's. So, I would have expected that it should have been a more pertinent or more immediate and pressing line of inquiry to follow. In addition to above, given his alleged violent tendencies and the allegation of he allegedly struck Annie in the weeks before her disappearance, this suspect at the classic triad means motive and opportunity. Annie McCarrick acted with integrity and independence in meeting this man, but sadly, while she knew the extent of the danger she faced there, so while she knew that he was potentially violent, she did not realise the extent of the danger she faced, sadly.
Yeah, we have to be careful what more we can say. I need to be very careful with my words. As we said, we have spoken with at least two witnesses, and I want to emphasize these witnesses have already shared their information. It's not like they're privately sharing something with us and then sharing it with Gardaí, or haven't. They have. This is information known to Gardaí. I am trying to figure out the circumstances of the lead up to that weekend. We have the so-called last known video footage of Annie, which was, as Brian has qualified, which was purported to have been on the day of her disappearance, the 26th. We Gardaí, after a number of us questioned them about that, they have now conceded it was actually, I think it was wasn't it the 11th, something around the 10th or 11th of March, that it was an earlier visit to the bank. That's like, kind of like, almost, let's all pretend we never said that, Gardaí. Let's all pretend we never said she went to the supermarket after she went to the bank. It's just like, let's pretend we didn't mention about the bank, and now she's just only went to the supermarket. It's kind of like, well, you need to still fix that, Gardaí, as regards your next appeal, and when you put a reconstruction together, because you still haven't properly addressed that. The next thing I would say is, I think I might have it in the files. We can give you an image of Annie McCarrick when she was last seen. We can give you an image of Annie McCarrick at the St. Patrick's parade. We can do that. Why the fuck can't Gardaí do that? They can give you a false bank image of her 10 days before. We can do that. Why can't they? That's my concern and frustration about this whole case and the way it has happened. There are questions need to be asked about Annie, who she was with and in contact in the lead up to that Thursday and Friday. We need to understand the real circumstances of that so-called evening dinner party, and why either Annie suggested it, or her two guests that we know were going to be at it suggested that they meet her, and what might have been that conversation around that, and what was
probably
really
more likely if she was hosting it. Probably more likely she invited, but you don't know. You can't say for certain.
We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know the circumstances, and I still am not convinced we know all of the people that Annie found prior to her disappearance, and what those conversations are, and the people are being entirely sincere and honest about the information that they have. We know they aren't. Gardaí know they aren't, and that's why we are where we are. Because
I mean, if the alleged working theory is true, then that would, and I suppose this is the thing. The timeline, you followed the timeline there. She gets the messages, she puts them inside the door, she leaves. She wasn't going to go very far from there.
Nope.
And so on. Like, all of that fits with if you look at the working theory.
I'm not going far. I'm coming back.
Yeah, she was going to end it. It was going to be a short conversation.
I ain't going to Johnny Fox's for the day.
She wasn't going very far, number one. Number two, if she was meeting somebody, it was going to be a short conversation. And if all of this, the alleged stuff that she was struck, there was a guy harassing her and so on, if that's all true, then that fits with her movements and activities in the house. She was probably sounded like she was a bit distracted if she just dropped the messages. That fits in with that. Again, it's not the evidence. It's kind of the evidence backwards, if you like. It fits in with it, but it doesn't prove anything. The other side of it then is, it strongly suggests phoning the friends and asking them that she needed some moral support and she needed some help. She didn't look to the two housemates. She obviously wasn't close friends of she invited or was meeting with her friend Hillary. He was a close friend from going right back to 1987. So it looks like she would have needed some moral support or, some help from some of her friends during that period there as well, if the working theory is true. So,
and the other aspect would be, which we don't know about, and again we'll put the image up.
Yeah.
Who and in what company was Annie with at that St. Patrick's parade? I don't know.
There was a Sunday Mirror article during the week said it was the suspect, but again, you can't prove
the suspect. Well, here's what I'll tell you. I will tell you. I will say that I will be open about this. In 2023, the review team reviewed everything over the last 2 decades. And said, if you have a case, if you eventually want to bring a case, you need to bust those 2 alibis.
Yeah.
We know who we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that was achieved in January, February this year. And that's why we had an arrest.
Yeah.
Because the alibis were busted. Persons unnamed were not where they claimed to be. Persons known to Annie, who claimed they hadn't seen Annie for weeks, were known by other friends to have been in her company literally a week, days before her disappearance. When you're interviewed by Gardaí, even in a very early stage of a disappearance, if you're saying that to them, then years later there are going to be serious questions as to why did you say that when it wasn't true. And that's where we are. We are where 2 people are saying, one is saying one thing, the other is saying another, and one is conflicting the alibi of the other. That doesn't mean they're both suspects. We only know one is a suspect. But one is now contradicting the alibi of the other. Maybe conscience has caught up with them. Brian?
It had to be some,
yeah,
a kind of a divide and conquer move had to be the only way to kind of break it there, not exactly dividing, but you know what I mean, along those lines anyway, to get one of them the suspect. Okay,
I think there's only so much more we can say about this case because we are restricted. And before we move on to the Ashling case, I am going to say again, 1, don't waste our time with Larry Murphy in your comments. Fuck off somewhere else. We're not interested. This case has moved long on beyond that. We're not interested. Go away. Go troll somewhere else. Go entertain your conspiracy theories somewhere else. And please be respectful. And I have had to delete at least 2 comments. 1, Mr. L, you know who you are. We don't take kindly to you posting literally an RIP and naming family members literally on just a homage to a family who have lost a loved one, just because you wanted to play one-upmanship and be the clever boy. I know who they are. Go away, unsubscribe, fuck off. Brian, let's move on to Ashling Murphy.
Okay, but just finally, we've got, before we move on there, we just got to find a picture of Annie McCarrick there.
Yeah,
Rest
please.
in peace, Annie McCarrick.
Yeah.
And we again hope that she get her family, her surviving mother, Mrs. McCarrick, gets answers and on what happened to her daughter. So very tragic case, like the others. Okay, move on there. The murder of Ashling Murphy. Now, just case background. This is a short update now, folks, because it's already gone through the trial. So, Ashling Murphy was an Irish primary school teacher, traditional Irish musician and camogie player who was murdered in January 2022 while jogging on the towpath of the Grand Canal at Cabancur outside Tullamore, County Offaly. Now, this is in the Midlands in Ireland. Now, this stretch of the canal is designated Fiona's Way after missing local hairdresser Fiona Pender, who we talked about earlier. And Ashling Murphy was a horrific attack, was stabbed repeatedly in the neck and died within minutes from cardiorespiratory arrest. So it was a vicious, brutal murder. Her death gave rise to widespread public grief, as well as outrage over violence against women, and tens of thousands of people attended vigils in her memory. In the days following Ashling's murder, the Gardaí, the Irish police, questioned 2 people before finally charging a 31-year-old man living in the area, Joseph Puška of Mokla, near Tullamore, and originally from Slovakia, who was married with 5 children. Now, Puška was convicted of the murder and been found guilty by the unanimous verdict of a Central Criminal Court jury in November 2023. He was sentenced to life and is currently serving that sentence. Now, a memorial to Ashling Murphy lies a few hundred yards down the canal from Fiona Pender's monument, and a large glass candle case is in place at the latter monument, Fiona Pender's monument, bearing photos of both women in tribute to them. Now, we've a case update. Do you want to add anything before we go into the case update there?
No, Brian. Go with the cat, and then I'll give my thoughts at the end, because I only have one particular point to make on this case.
Yeah, there's a short update anyway. I mean, okay, just to the case update. You know, in May 2025, Joseph Puška's brothers, Marek Puška, age 36, and Lubomir Puška Jr., age 38, went on trial at the Central Criminal Court, charged with withholding evidence, including that Puška returned home on the night of the murder with visible injuries and admitted to killing or seriously injuring a woman with the knife. Their wives, Puškina Grunzova, age 32, and Viera Gaziova, age 40, were charged with impeding Puška's apprehension of our prosecution by burning his clothes. Now, the impact on this case was very clear. In his opening speech to the jury, Sean Gillan, Senior Counsel for the Director of Public Prosecutions, stated that Gardaí could not find the crucial clothes that Puška was wearing when he murdered Ms. Murphy, because his sisters-in-law had burned them. So that was a vital piece of evidence destroyed there. Now, we have a photo there of those 4 there as well. Joseph Puška's wife, Lucia Istakova, pleaded guilty just before the trial started to withholding information, including the fact that her husband Puška arrived home with visible injuries, that he admitted killing or seriously injuring a woman with a knife, and that he owned a bicycle the Gardaí were interested in. This plea could not be reported until now to ensure a fair trial for the other members of the family, the other 4 that we mentioned there. All 5 remain remanded on bail as of June this month, and a sentence date will be fixed on the 7th of July 2025 to see what they're going to do with them. So, discussion and conclusion. Now, there's little more to add as regards this heartbreaking case, other than to reiterate that many murderers act with the aid of others. We've seen that earlier, allegedly, and by their own complicity or duress. But either way, the result could lead to justice being denied for the victim and their family. So, you want to add a point there, Mick?
The only real point I want to make, well, 2. Ashling's murder was horrific, but I think Gardaí knew from an early stage the movements of their suspect, that he had help, and we don't often see this in a case like this, because I wouldn't say quite often, but more often Gardaí will say, look, whatever happened. If you give us information, we won't press charges, we'll exonerate you, just help us get this guy. Because the people around him were relatives, brothers, wives, it led to them forming a circle around him and helping him. And I think that's what pissed Gardaí off so much, and probably the general public, when they started to get wind this guy's being protected here. And it, and I don't, please do not fill the comment section with your immigration, let's, please do not go there in the comment section. Deal with this case as it is, a person and a family protecting him, and that's what happened there. And I think that's what pissed people off most, and that's why the Gardaí decided that they weren't just going to make an example. They weren't making an example of this family around this guy just for the sake of it. It was because of the efforts that they went to hide information and to hide his guilt, well, and destroy evidence. That's the difference. That's why they were made an example of. Now we have 4 people found guilty, and I doubt all of these 4 people are going to see the inside of bars from here on. I suspect
5 including the wife there, Mick.
And 5 including the wife, but in fairness, at least at an earlier stage, she pleaded, went game up, and she probably, the reason why she is exclusive to that is because she was the key to pointing the finger at the rest of them and saying, I didn't do this alone, hands up, I am guilty of what happened, but they participated in this. And that's why,
and she didn't destroy evidence either.
She didn't destroy evidence. I think we will see custodial sentences for at least 1 or 2. I'm not entirely convinced we're going to see custodial sentences for all 4. We'll see. We'll watch this and we'll update. I don't know what your own thoughts on it are, Brian.
Yeah, just, I mean, it's hard to tell because, like, the 2 women burnt clothes, but I know were they under duress. Either way, it's the same thing. They shouldn't have been doing that. And then the 2 lads were charged with withholding the evidence. So it's hard. I don't know what the ins and outs of it. Who to what? That's high level. Maybe it is as it says on the surface, but I mean, you'd think, like, if one of them gets jailed, you'd expect all 4 would get it, but I don't know. Or they might get suspended sentences.
But, it could, and obviously that's not going to go down well in public perception if all 4 get suspended sentences, because I think it gives out the wrong signal.
It does,
because this is a two-faced thing, and I want to be careful here with a case like this. We are constantly appealing to people historically to come forward who have information on a very serious case. People don't come forward because they're terrified, they're afraid of the information that they have that's almost been weighed down on them by somebody else that told them that, often a culprit or suspect, and they're afraid because they think they're going to get in trouble. And it's even worse if they haven't said anything at the time and they only come forward with it later. They'll end up like these 4 doofers, and they'll be, and that's the problem. That's why this case is so interesting to me and how it turns out, because none of us want to give the perception to people that if you had information and you didn't come forward originally, that this is the way you're going to end up if you come forward and you're dealt with. Oh well, you almost helped him, in the crime, because you've told us what you told, and that's the problem here. And so I think we need to be very careful. These people operating, this isn't about a girlfriend being told, some casual thought of, I killed your woman, sure, or if you mistreat me, I'll bury you like the last woman I told you about. That's different to actually burning clothes, transporting somebody from one part of the country to another, knowing that they have done some heinous deed. That's entirely different. So I want to be very careful here that we're not, while we're happy that these people have been convicted, I just think it's important not to send out the wrong signal to people who have crucial information about a case and are terrified of coming forward because they think they're going to get implicated, because they might be a relative, they might be a friend that had close contact with the suspect, and that's what I'm concerned about in messages that are sent out.
Yeah, exactly. So again, we just got a final photo there. Rest in peace, Ashling Murphy. An awful end for a very talented young lady there as well. No, these are 4 tough cases, harrowing stuff there. So just some final thoughts there. I mean, I think 3 of these cases highlight the fact that murderers often require and invoke support from others, and this is not acceptable. And such accomplices, can be charged there as well. They have, and we saw there with alibis and so on, and some of the investigations and arrests that take places there, like how some people do get help and so on. And 2 of the cases have been updated in this episode, have seen convictions. We sincerely hope that both Annie McCarrick's and Fiona Pender's respective remains can be located and returned to their families for proper burial. And this is often the primary or only concern of the families, the missing over justice in the conventional sense. And the mothers of both women have made statements to this effect. But other families will want justice as well, and friends as well. So we hope these cases are solved for the surviving family members, and they get what they need out of that. There's no consolations, but at least if they need to get the remains back, and that somebody's held to account for that. Any final thoughts, Mick?
That we can return Annie McCarrick and Fiona Pender to their families. Yeah. That's it for me.
Yeah, same here, definitely. So rest in peace to Tina Satchwell, Fiona Pender, Annie McCarrick, and Ashling Murphy. And these are the updates today, folks. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Radio Espial. We plan to be back with another feature episode next week and a timeline episode the week after, hopefully. We've other plans beyond that, so keep an eye on the channel posts page for any updates there as well. Stay safe and look after each other. God bless, folks.
Thank you, Brian.